Hello everybody, it's Mrs. Bennett-Morgenstern. Figured I'd let you see my face for once. Today we're going to move on to something that I don't usually get to in the classroom, but I thought it was a good segue because it is, a lot of the vocabulary is going to be very similar from what you heard in the last video about relief printmaking, and you'll kind of see the similarities between what I talked about with, making a relief block to print with and what I'm going to start talking about today. This last art form is probably the biggest. It is the one that you don't even realize that it's art, but yet you use it, you live in it, you experience it every single day. It's the largest art form, and that is three-dimensional art. Now, in a fine arts class, when we talk about three-dimensional art, a lot of people automatically think of a sculpture, Michelangelo's David, or Venus de Milo, or the Statue of Liberty, things to look at and admire. And yes, that's true. Sculpture is part of three-dimensional art, but three-dimensional art is, in technical terms, having or seeming to have depth or thickness. So that pretty much covers most of everything that we have in the world, okay? That is real. When we looked at linear perspective in Art 1, we know that we can imitate three-dimensional qualities by learning how to manipulate our drawing to make it look like it's going back in space or coming forward in space. Okay, and that's why they use the definition to include seeming to have. So these are things that can appear to be real or physically are real. So in these next videos, I'm going to be talking about things that are physically real. And that is about everything in the whole world. So a lot of 3D art is functional. It has a practical use and huge. I'm standing in one, you're sitting in one. Your house, it's a three-dimensional artwork. Non-functional are the sculptures that I just mentioned previously. Their purpose is aesthetic. It's to be beautiful or to teach a historic event or to be religious in nature or just to be beautiful, like jewelry. Jewelry is three-dimensional, okay? You wear it, and it adorns you and has a quality that's pleasing. Sculpture, which, I'm using the term really broadly here, is created by what we talked about in relief printmaking, which is by adding things together or subtracting things from something. The best way to describe this is building a house or carving a sculpture. So Michelangelo's David and the Statue of Liberty, they had to be carved out of something first. And of course, then the Statue of Liberty had to be made by a process called casting, which is what you would learn in a sculpture class at the college level. I know how to do it a little bit, but it's huge, okay? But relief is really important in three-dimensional art because it's the beginning of that projection out from a surface. So a relief sculpture is the projection of sculpted forms from a flat surface. So you can either carve away at the surface like we did with the soft cut or the wood block, or you can add to the surface like we did with the yarn print, okay? So there's plenty of different ways that you can create relief sculpture, a relief art form in and of itself that isn't to be used for something else like a printmaking block. And the type of relief sculpture that we're going to talk about in this video is called bas-relief. Okay, it's French, so you don't pronounce the S. Bas-relief. Sculpture in which the form projects very slightly from a flat background. Okay, and when I do this in the classroom, this is always the first form of three-dimensional art that I do, is number one, because it's very easy to use really basic things that you have around your house or things that are very, very inexpensive in the classroom to buy for a lot of people, okay? When we get into things like ceramics, which is a three-dimensional art form, it's also called an applied art, things start to get a little more expensive and you need space and it takes up a lot of room and there's a big long process to it. But working with bas-relief is fairly easy. And once again, I'm going to try to, you could totally try to do this around the house because I'm guaranteed that you do have most of these materials. What I have here is some pieces of cardboard. Okay, and again, you can use the boxes that I showed you, or a shoe box. That's a good thickness of cardboard to use for this. And we're going to be using aluminum foil, which I'm going to go into a little bit more in a minute. I just have some Elmer's glue, plain and simple. And what I have here is a pre-made box. I was going to try to go through the process of making a box with some of the cardboard that I had, but it takes too long, and just dug through an old dresser drawer and found this. Now I do this project in the classroom where we actually use some of the cardboard I have and make these. One of the hard parts about making a box is that you have to make sure that the top of the box is just slightly bigger than the bottom of the box, so it fits over it, okay? So we're actually just gonna be using with the top of the box. However, I did wanna mention that I am gonna be using some acrylic paint that I have, and I just bought it at Walmart. And if you wanted to paint the box a different color, I usually do silver in the classroom with the silver tempera paint. You can certainly paint the box. This has got a lot of stickers on it, so I'm actually, I'll probably do this later, but again, it takes so much time. And I also have the little fuzzy stuff for the inside of the box after we're all done, so you can use it again as a jewelry box or to keep something special in. I have examples of this particular project in the classroom. I just didn't bring them home because I didn't know if I was going to be doing this or not. But, you know, if we get back there and you want to see it, ask, because I have a bunch of them. So, first thing I want to talk about is aluminum foil. And a lot of times in the classroom, we use this for other things, basically for covering paint in Art 1. But aluminum foil is kind of a nifty item because, you know, at home it has tons of uses. And honestly, I always buy the heavy duty because I like it to be a little more rugged when I want to throw things in the barbecue. But I did a little research about aluminum, and it is one of the most prevalent. That means it's like everywhere on Earth, but it doesn't come in a form by itself. You just don't dig up a rock of aluminum. It's in other things, basically feldspar. And it just so happens that it's a major ingredient in the clay that we use. Aluminum and silica make up most of what clay is in our classroom. But aluminum has to be kind of extracted from what they call an ore. And then they, you know, through whatever processes they use, they create what they call a billet, which is like a big log of aluminum. And they, through the heating process and electromagnetic things, they kind of roll it out to a thickness that is usable. Now, sometimes aluminum can be thicker and used for other things, but for household purposes, you know, it usually comes in, usually has it on here, 11.14 m squared. Okay, so I don't know what thickness that is, but it's pretty thin. So it's not cheap though, if you consider how much is in a roll. Okay. The British call it aluminium, which is actually the original way to say it. But in America and Canada, we call it aluminum, and it's spelt that way. In Great Britain and in the rest of the world, it's spelt with an I here. Aluminium. Aluminium. Okay, and aluminum foil is was made for general purpose use in Europe in 1910. And the Toblerone, the company Tobler that makes the Toblerone candy, they were the first one to use it for the purposes of wrapping chocolate. And then the company that eventually got bought by Nestle in France, they started using it for their chocolates. And in the United States, it was first used in 1912 for lifesavers. So a lot of things are really, really dependent on aluminum. And I have examples just in my kitchen of things that are dependent on aluminum. This is some vegetable broth. And the reason why it doesn't have to be in the refrigerator is the box is lined with aluminum. Once you open up the cap and expose that to air, then you have to store it in the refrigerator because this isn't airtight. But aluminum's pretty darn airtight, and it doesn't allow water in very well either. So, you know, pretty cool stuff. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a relief design. So the cardboard is going to be glued to the surface, and I can do some decoration along the side if I wanted to, just with the Elmer's glue. And I'm going to let it just sit for a minute or two, let it stiffen up and dry before I do the rest of it. So what you would do in the classroom is just kind of make up a very, very basic design, nothing too fancy. Okay, I'm just gonna quickly get this on here so this doesn't take forever as usual. And I wanna put the glue here. Don't need a lot. And you could put something on top of this for a while after you glue all of the smaller pieces of cardboard on. Between this and the next part of the process, you do want to let it dry for a little while because you want to make sure that the glue is stiffened up a bit so things don't slide around. Looks like I'm making a tic-tac-toe board. I'm not going to leave it like that. I just want to get some kind of design on here that's raised up off the surface. So that's a bas relief. Okay. I'm going to take my wider piece, kind of eyeball a square right there. You know, and of course, if we had more time, you can get more particular and, oh, that fit pretty good. Not bad. Okay, a little bit off, but not going to try to get picky. The glue itself, if you wanted to use it very, very thickly, that would also create a bas relief. So say you wanted to write something in cursive on the cover of your jewelry box, you would have to have amazing control over the glue. But, you know, you could do that, and you would just have to be very, very careful not to touch it while it's drying. So I'm actually going to put this to the side because I want to show you some other interesting things that I just found around the house that are examples of relief three-dimensional art, and both additive and subtractive. The first one I have is a little additive piece, and one of the students who's still in school, I'm not going to mention her name, actually bought this for a gift for me for teacher appreciation or something. And it's just a votive candle. The container, just one of those containers that you find at the dollar store, and it's just been decorated with beads. Okay, so because it's raised up, that's a relief sculpture. And it also has texture to it. And I like the colors. It needs to be cleaned. This is a picture of my mom when she was in high school. The late 1930s, maybe 1939, 1940. What I'm looking at here, though, is the frame. So you can see the decoration that in the original creation of this particular frame design, somebody came up with a carving of this. And then they made a mold of it and just made multiple copies with the metal. So it is a metal frame. But that is a relief design in the frame of this piece. And then probably the most interesting piece I have of relief sculpture in the house. And it's not fragile, and it is fragile because very kind of unique, is this. I'm going to tilt it up. This is an ostrich egg. And my sister went to Africa. She went to Namibia, Africa, for safari. And this is an ostrich egg that's been carved. They're really thick and sturdy. I mean, it is pretty thick, with wildebeests and scenes from the savannah with trees up here. And it's got holes drilled into it. And when I put the light inside, you'll be able to see the design. It's designed to be a light. So you can see the wildebeest carved into the surface of the egg. This is a really good example of bas-relief. Bas-relief historically is one of the oldest forms of sculpture. All of the Egyptian buildings have hundreds and hundreds of what we call a frieze, a continuous story, carved into the stone in very, very low relief. The Sumerians did it. They still do it for a particular type of functional piece of artwork that you use every day. Not very often anymore, but we still use it, and that is coins. So here is a $50, actually, this is a full dollar. Silver dollar, it's not really silver. Okay, and you can see President Eisenhower's head is in very, very low relief. And again, this is something that is since the invention of money and the exchange of money and having borders between country, the designs for coinage is thousands of years old now. And it's done with bas-relief. Okay. So it's all around you and you don't even realize it. Trim these little guys off of here. When we're in the classroom, I would use aluminum foil for a project, just regular kitchen aluminum foil for this project. But there are other types of aluminum that are really, really a lot thicker, and it's called tooling foil. And you can do a lot of cool projects with that too. It's a little more intense as far as like the safety procedures. Now I'm going to cut a piece, tear it off, and I want to make sure that it doesn't have a lot of crinkles in it to start. And I also want to make sure that when I put this on, it's going to be able to fold around the edges. Okay, so I need some extra, not just what's going to cover the top here. You might notice that the other side is kind of on the duller side, and there's a reason for that, and I can't remember what it is, but aluminum foil, because of its heat conducting properties, they make it so you know which side is the better conductor to put the food onto the surface that's hot. Okay, so I'm going to do something that I don't recommend doing, but I'm going to save this for something else. Just want to cut the extra off, and there is nothing worse than cutting aluminum foil with another metal blade. Ugh, horrible. Yikes, that's just making my teeth cringe. Okay, get that on there. I'm going to put a couple of dots of glue on here. Boop. And, you know, given the video quality, I'm actually going to use the dull side on this. Given the video quality, I don't really know if this is showing up very well, but I'm just gently pressing it down so I can find the edges. Okay, and awful. Trimming it off. I sometimes put the tooling foil on the paper cutter. Whew. I don't like when I don't want anybody around when I do that because it's an awful sound. Cutting the corners to make it easier to fold this over the edge. Cut a little too deep on that one. Trying not to crinkle it up. I have an example of this out in the big display case out in the hallway of a jewelry box that I made with this process. And I used one of the long jewelry boxes. Okay, now you have to start getting into it. I'm going to kind of smooth out the edges first, where the square part of the box is. Corners. Okay. You don't need a lot of glue because, you know, aluminum foil by nature stays pretty together and it doesn't get old. I didn't read in the Wikipedia article what the half-life is. A lot of metals have pretty long life. They're not going anywhere. Okay, so hopefully you can see the texture. The bas relief on the box. All right, one last thing. I'm going to take some black acrylic paint. Can't use watercolor for this. Can't use water-based markers for this. And I'm just going to antique this. Now, the method that they use to make aluminum look different is anodizing. It's an oxygen-based. And I have a paper towel that's just a little bit damp. And I'm going to just rub that around. You can use shoe polish, but you gotta let it dry for quite a while. So, If I had done other designs on here, I could really be picky about, you know, where I want that antique quality to go and how much I'm going to rub off. I'm actually going to use that for a little texture, okay? Just to, it's hard to see, but give it some interesting quality. When you do use the acrylic paint, I would have let it dry for a little bit longer, and then I would have used the paper towel to buff it, but I don't really have time to do that because the video is getting too long. You can add little jewels, you know, plastic jewels to it. You can put some glue on it and add some glitter to it, or you can just leave it plain silver. Okay, so that is a bas-relief jewelry box and, well, gift box.